My name is John. I am a man who died once on a sidewalk in the snow, only to find that the spirit does not freeze. I am here because I made a vow in the shivering dark, a promise that if I breathed again, I would speak the truth of what happens when love becomes a burial ground. Do not look away. If you are here, your soul is tired of the noise. I am going to tell you how I went from a man with a home, a name, and a future, to a shadow standing in the slush of a Christmas Eve blizzard, watching 20 black Teslas surround my frozen body like silent, mechanical guardians. To understand the miracle, you must understand the fire that preceded it. For 7 long years, my life was a liturgy of devotion. I remember the gold leaf mornings, the light hitting the kitchen table at 7 a.m., creating a halo around the person I thought was my forever. We built a cathedral out of ordinary moments, shared glances across a crowded room, and whispered promises made in the safety of 2 a.m. I gave my youth my secrets and my very breath to a love I thought was my fortress. I believed if I laid enough bricks of loyalty, the structure would be indestructible. I thought that if I was the perfect partner, the perfect provider, the perfect shadow, I would be safe. I poured my inheritance into our shared dreams. I worked extra shifts until my bones ached, just to buy the pearls she wore to dinners where I was often the only one truly listening. I was building a monument to a future I thought we both wanted, never realizing I was the only one holding the shovel. I spent years perfecting the art of being what she needed, erasing my own desires until I was nothing but a reflection of her expectations. I thought this was the price of a soulmate. I thought this was how you earn a seat at the table of eternity. Back then, I thought love was enough. But the spirit knows before the mind admits. The rod arrived in whispers. It was in her phone tilted away from my sight, a wall of glass becoming a wall of stone. It was in the "I'm tired" that sounded like a death sentence. The warmth drained out of our rooms until the air felt thin. I asked, "What is happening to us?" and was met with clinical coldness. I was told I was too sensitive, that my care was suffocating. They turned my intuition into a weapon and used it against me. I felt the foundations cracking, but I stayed. I thought endurance was devotion. I remember the nights I sat in the driveway for an hour before going inside, bracing myself for the silence that waited behind the door. I convinced myself that every great love had a winter, that if I could just survive the frost, the spring would be twice as sweet. I was wrong. The winter wasn't a season. It was the climate of her heart. I spent years trying to light fires in a room where she was opening all the windows, trying to keep a dying flame alive with the oxygen from my own lungs, until I was breathless and dizzy with despair. I became a beggar in my own kingdom, pleading for scraps of affection from a hand that had grown cold and heavy with indifference. I ignored the red flags because I was too busy trying to use them to keep us warm. Then the music stopped. Christmas Eve. The air smelled of wood smoke and festive cheer, but inside, it smelled of iron and endings. There was no argument, only the terrifying efficiency of a heart that had already moved on. The words were practiced, sharp, and stripped of all history. You need to leave. Now! I stood paralyzed in the hallway, surrounded by the decorations we had put up only days before. The twinkling lights seemed to mock the darkness falling over my life. She didn't look at me. She looked through me, as if I were a piece of furniture that no longer fit the aesthetic of her new life. My life was shoved into black plastic bags. The sound of the zippers was like teeth gnashing in the dark. As the door clicked shut, I heard a haunting, hollow laughter from the other side. They weren't just ending a relationship. They were celebrating the disposal of a burden. I stood on the curb, the snow claiming my shoulders, feeling every sacrifice turn into lead. I watched the lights in the window. My window flicker with the warmth of fire I had built, but was no longer allowed to feel. The neighbors passed by with gifts, their laughter stinging like salt in an open wound. I was a ghost in my own neighborhood, a man whose entire existence had been erased in the span of 20 minutes. I stood there for what felt like hours, waiting for the door to open, waiting for someone to say it was all a cruel joke. But the only thing that opened was the sky, pouring down a white shroud to bury the man I used to be. Every dream I had ever harbored, every plan I had made for the coming year, was dissolving in the freezing wind. I was a king who had been stripped of his crown and cast into the wilderness by the very person I had sworn to protect with my life. I began to walk. My feet were leaden, my boots soaked. I reached a park bench where an old man sat trembling, his feet bare against the ice. In that absolute desolation, I realized my boots were the only thing I had left to give. I sat beside him, unlaced them, and slid them onto his feet. I felt the ice bite my skin, but for the first time, I felt clean. I felt empty, and in that emptiness, there was space for the truth to enter. I told him I had nowhere to go. He didn't speak. He just pointed toward the road. I thought he was telling me to keep moving, to find a shelter, but he was pointing toward a destiny I hadn't yet earned. I sat there in the silence, my toes turning blue, feeling the last of my old life slip away. I wasn't afraid anymore. When you have lost everything, the fear of loss loses its power over you. I was ready to let the snow take me, ready to become part of the silence. The silence shattered with a low, electric hum. 20 Teslas emerged from the blizzard, headlights cutting the snow like white fire. The stranger I helped stood up, his posture no longer bent. He was the guardian of the gate I was meant to walk through. As the car door opened, I realized the universe had been watching the entire time. The person who vowed to love me was laughing behind a lock. But 20 strangers were standing in the cold to ensure I didn't fall. The man I had given my boots to was not a beggar. He was a test. He was the final threshold between the man who begged for love and the man who was worthy of it. I was lifted from the gutter not by the one I loved, but by the kindness I had shown when I had nothing left to offer. I saw the truth. I wasn't being punished. I was being harvested. Every ounce of love I poured into that hollow vessel had been a waste, because I was pouring it into a sieve. I realized that the house I lost was never a home, and the woman I loved was never my partner. She was a mirror reflecting back my own desperation. By throwing me out, she had inadvertently set me free from the prison of my own devotion. I sat in the back of that silent car, watching the snow bury the street where I used to live, and I felt a peace so profound it was terrifying. I was no longer John, the man who was discarded. I was John, the man who was chosen. I realized that the rejection was actually my redirection. The universe had to burn down the house I was living in because it was too small for the person I was becoming. I loved deeply alone, but tonight I'm not alone, and neither are you. If you are standing on your own curb tonight, holding the bags of discarded life, listen. This pain is your initiation. It is a fire that burns away the dross, so only the gold remains. You are being stripped of what is false, so you can finally inhabit what is true. You are not a victim of a breakup. You are a survivor of a revelation. The person who left you didn't take your future with them. They only took their presence out of it. If these words touch your hidden places, if you feel a stirring in your spirit that you haven't felt in years, then you are part of this testimony. I want you to like this testimony right now. Not for me, but to send a signal through the darkness that the broken are rising. Share this with the one person you know is currently sitting in their own blizzard. Be the light they didn't know was coming. Subscribe to When Love Breaks. Here, we do not just mourn the fire, we become it. We are building a cathedral of souls who have survived the winter and found the sun within themselves. Comment the words, "I am waking up," below. Speak it into the atmosphere. Reclaim your name from the mouths of those who tried to bury it. Tell the world that you are no longer a ghost in someone else's story. The sun is rising on a new version of you. A version that doesn't need to beg for warmth because you have become the sun itself. The silence is over. The dawn is here. The door that shut on you was the greatest gift you ever received, for it forced you to find a key to your own kingdom. You are free. You are whole. You are finally truly awake. Some people don't break your heart. They wake you up.